All right, so Immortal Technique, Rock to Save Darfur. So what do you think is key to bringing attention to the situation in Darfur right now, after so much has been written about it already? What can we change at this point?
I mean, I think a lot of people think just because it's not being written about as much as it was before, that all of a sudden the situation has gone away. While the better part of major military operations have calmed down, there's still the issue of slavery that exists there. And I think that's a global issue, because now we're looking at people who are economically enslaved in America, and then we're watching a parallel of people who are still physically enslaved in Africa. And I mean, just like I'll repeat on stage, everybody at some point, every government was involved in the slave trade. You know, every religion was involved in the slave trade. Christians, Jews, Muslims. And I think by understanding that, it helps us look at what direction we need to move in as a human race. And I think the important thing to take from this is to realize that we still haven't evolved as much as we think we have. If not only this is going on, but we allow this to go on. If there are corporations that are invested in some of these Chinese oil companies that are doing that. It's not like we can just blame foreign oil companies, because there are people and banks here in the United States of America that are invested in them in the millions. So, I mean, if that's the case, then where do we stand as a nation? Where do we stand as a people? How could we call ourselves the land of the free if we sponsor negativity and slavery in other parts of the world?
Do you think that they're going to have kind of similar situation to Somalia, like, you know, where it's kind of lawless and they can't produce any results for decades?
I think the difference in Darfur is that there are more natural resources that I think people are really concerned about, which make it a much more desirable place to be permanently. I think that's why a lot of people have gone there and a lot of people are invested in the region. In terms of Somalia, I think that's more of a strategic place to be, because it's right on the eastern part of Africa. It's right next to the Gulf. You know, there's not a lot of other countries that really just have that position. You know, so I'm hoping that what people take from a show like this is the fact that the hip hop community, in its rawest form, you know what I mean, the culture that is represented by that, is still putting out ideas like this, that it can exist, you know, and that it's done with a multi-ethnic, a multi-quote-unquote racial, multi-religious. There's Jews, Muslims, Christians that are involved in this, and that people aren't looking at it to represent their agenda. I'm not here with a personal agenda. I'm here to talk about what's going on out there and how it relates directly to the music that I have.
Sure. How do you think things will change with Obama in the office? Or do you think they will change at all, or is it the same politics as always?
I mean, I think it's hard to say that, being that it's only been, you know, 3 months since the man's been in office. But I think that around the world, the general consensus was that they were happy to have someone besides Bush, someone besides an old white man to be president of the United States. But I think the fact that he looks radically different than the rest of the presidents and talks different than the rest of them have lately isn't going to be enough for the world when they realize that the policies are going to be the same in terms of foreign relations. You know, they may be different in terms of the domestic policy, but I think that, you know, more by and large, people are kind of expecting it to be the same, but just said in a nicer way to them. You know what I mean? More polite about it. You know, we're gonna get along better with you, but you're gonna give me what I fucking want anyways.
Sure. Yesterday, Obama said that he's going to change U.S. economics, going from borrow and spend into conserve and invest. Do you think that that could happen in this country, or do you think that that's more like just a slogan than an actual deed?
I think the difference, or what would make a difference, is talking about what we're going to invest in. If we talk about the economic infrastructure of America, we can't just talk about corporations and investing in them and expecting that to trickle down, because then that's just an isotope of Ronald Reagan's little element of an idea, or the people that were behind him. I think if we're going to invest, we have to invest in people. We have to invest in science. We have to invest in education, which we're really not doing. Matter of fact, we're taking resources away from that. We're closing down programs that are open to immigrant students. You know what I mean? We talk about bettering immigration reform, but we still have communities in Arizona where people who are immigrants are treated like slaves. I think that if he really wanted to invest in something, he should look at the programs that are being slashed right now because people don't think that they work. But at the same time, there are programs among those that produce results that really do affect the human psyche and the way that people look at themselves as being a part of this country, or at least what that means.
Okay.
It's sad because I don't think the American public has a problem spending, or it's not that they have a problem with it. The majority of Americans, I should say, think it's a necessary thing to spend, $10 billion, do a bombing run on the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, but don't realize that if they spent 5% of that money, if they spent $500 million building the economic infrastructure of Afghanistan, in the area where I just came from, to build up schools, to build up hospitals, to build roads, to facilitate clean drinking water, to get medical supplies and enable them to produce their own medical supplies. I think that would win the people over 10 times more, but that is what the American people would have a problem with. They would be like, oh, you know what the fuck are you spending $500 million to fix their country when our country's fucked up? We have unemployment in Florida, you know what I mean? There are people that are losing their jobs at a ridiculous rate in New York, and what about California and Texas and Oklahoma? And at that point, then politicians feel that strain and they begin to realize, okay, it's just 10 times easier to tell, oh, we're gonna bomb these terrorists. And then people are like, oh, sure, they don't even ask a fucking question about that. But as soon as the money's being used for something good, people have a problem with that. Unless we change that mentality, then we can't expect to go anywhere in the world and for people to greet us like a liberator, because all we're really doing is enabling them to kill other people. Right. We're asking them to do something horrible for us. We're going to give you weapons, you can kill people. Fine, you want to support someone against a terrible regime, that's one thing. But without rebuilding an infrastructure, that was the mistake in the first place. That's the reason that Afghanistan fell into the hands of the Taliban, because afterwards we didn't do anything in terms of restructuring things. And I think that's something else that's being brought up here too, about the nature of interventionism, which is a dialogue that we don't have and a debate that we don't have in this country. People say, oh, we shouldn't have gone to Iraq, or we should get out there. Well, then wouldn't it develop into the same situation in Afghanistan? If we should have never gone there, fine, then where should we go? Should we have gone to Rwanda? I think we should have. Shouldn't we have gone to Bosnia, earlier? Because we showed up after all the genocides were happening and then acted like we were fucking cleanup for the morality of the world. Should we go to Darfur? These are interesting questions to ask. Would U.S. troops in Darfur stop slavery permanently, or would they simply turn and polarize one section of the populace that much more against another? That's the debate we're not having, because I think people are afraid to have that debate because they're afraid to uncover who's really making all the money off of all this.